now the man, the toughest job in showbiz, Peter Cardwell, is here. Top presenter, of course, political commentator. We make him watch PMQs, the whole lot of it, so he can pick out some clips and we don't have to. First question, always at this time of the day this week on a Wednesday. Were there any highlights we need to talk about, or do you want to just head off out of the studio?
Not massively, Julie. I think I should probably just go and you can.
All right, fair enough. Guys, we need some calls. Please call in. 0344 499 1000.
So it was fine. I mean, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't. There were lots of questions about tariffs, for example.
Well, I was going to say it's a bit weird. It's quiet because we're a week after spring statement.
Well, that was the first question.
Although that's already unravelling.
Yes, it is, and that's the first question that I'm going to bring you from Kemi Badenoch, actually asking about all these figures banding around. Labour saying everybody £500 worse off. The OBR saying actually £3,500 worse off average family. Which is it? And that's essentially what Kemi Badenoch asked within this. But in the answer, very, very interesting. Just listen to what Keir Starmer says in this, because I think he reveals something about the £22 billion black hole, which, of course, may or may not exist.
Very interesting. So let's have a watch and listen of that clip.
During the election, the Prime Minister also promised that he would not increase taxes on working people. But even the OBR says that the jobs tax will be passed on to workers. On average, families will be £3,500 poorer. Why should anyone trust him again?
Prime Minister.
Well, her fantasy figure is about as much use as Liz Truss's economic planning. But let me get her position right if I can follow it. She wants the extra £26 billion in the NHS, Mr. Speaker, that was paid for by the national insurance rise. She wants that. She doesn't want to reverse the national insurance rises. So she's now reduced this absurd position of voting against the budget, carping against a budget that she actually agrees with.
Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with making people poorer. I don't agree with pensioner poverty.
Because a good comeback there from Kemi Badenoch, but talk us through what Starmer said.
So he said today, within that answer, that the £23.8 billion national insurance tax hike of the budget was to fund the £22 billion more for the NHS. But at the time of the budget in October, Rachel Reeves says it was to plug the £22 billion black hole.
Right.
So
which is it?
So, well, it's also the second question is, have they spent the money twice? Or did the black hole just not exist in the first place?
I think the answer to both those questions is yes. Right. I think it's actually, again, I don't think the numbers do add up. And we've got this, this fiscal headroom that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, claims to. It was 9.9 billion, and then there wasn't a fiscal headroom according to the latest figures because basically the economy ain't grown and all the other problems with the world economy. And she's found it again. It's rainy day money, effectively, but the OBR and everyone else is predicting that's going to be wiped out for the autumn proper budget. We may see more tax rises, we may see more spending cuts, or who knows what else is going to go on. We may see actually our borrowing costs going up. They're 100 billion a year already, just to service the interest. But everything, I feel like today, having PMQs today, everything is waiting on that announcement from Donald Trump. So it's 9 o'clock tonight UK time. It's going to be in the White House. As one of our guests said earlier, it should be on pay-per-view. People will be watching it.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people will be saying, I don't care what US tariffs are on. I don't work for a company that sells anything to the US. What difference does it make?
Well, it's going to affect all of us.
Tell us how it's going to affect
If the car industry, for example, which is a big enough industry in this...
800,000 people
That's
in this
right.
country.
If people lose their jobs, not everybody's going to lose their job, but if some of those people lose their jobs, well, that's going to have an effect on the wider economy. It's going to push prices up, and that's actually what Kemi Badenoch asked Keir Starmer, and he had quite the comeback to her in this second clip.
OK, let's have a watch and listen to that.
Labour's record is a car industry in crisis, even before tariffs. There are 25,000 more jobs now at risk. He says he's preparing for eventualities. Can the Prime Minister tell us exactly what he is doing to protect the British car industry from his failure to negotiate?
We're taking a calm, pragmatic approach and keeping our feet on the ground. Who's the Trade Secretary, Mr. Speaker, who failed to get a trade deal with the US?
Interesting, talking about the last Trade Secretary failing to get a trade deal with the US. Labour, as I recall, were very, very critical of the prospects for a trade deal with the US when they were in opposition. It was all about the Americans are going to basically privatise the NHS and make us all eat chlorinated chicken, which apparently, when it's sold here, is the worst thing in the world and will kill us. But if you have it on buffalo wings, if you're on a holiday in Florida, which is what you're eating, it's all chlorinated chicken in America, is absolutely fine.
Yes, it's fine.
I mean, it's utterly bizarre. I mean, it really is. It is utter madness.
I think we may be quite close to a trade deal. It's quite interesting what some of the reporting, especially from Steve Swinford at the Times, the sort of doyen of political reporting in this country, and he is saying...
All right, he'll take you to lunch, OK?
It's interesting, though, in terms of the fact that I think we're quite close to a trade deal, but at the same time, that's not going to happen until these tariffs are announced. I think Trump... My instinct is Trump wants to do what he always does, which is have a big announcement, something big, bold, America first.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! I'm saving America, everything's marvellous, and then slightly row back from it. We've seen that with Canada, we've seen that with Mexico, we've seen that with China already. We may well see that in some other instances.
He wants to have a reciprocal... A lot of our callers are pointing out today, and I think quite rightly, that actually, and again, I'm not sure that this tariff war is a good thing. I think this could roll completely out of control and be very damaging. I think damaging also to American consumers and not lead to those jobs being onshored as he hopes. But again, there's an element of this which is similar to Brexit, which is about, it's all very well having free movement of everything, trade and goods and services and people, but actually that impacts different people differently. And people at the bottom of the pile get impacted much harder than people at the top of the pile. So you get their free nannies and gardeners. I mean, cheap nannies and gardeners, and that's the reality. But I do think it's just really interesting how Keir Starmer is handling this and the impact of this, because of course he knows there's going to be an impact already on the car industry from that being announced, but he's changed the tune so much from when he was in opposition. This idea that this trade deal is kind of almost across the line somehow, but the idea that we should have, whether it's EU, Canada, Mexico, or anyone else, have tariffs on American goods which are higher than the tariffs they put on our goods. Well, I think most people can see that doesn't feel fair. They feel that Donald Trump has got a point.
Yes, and I think that's absolutely fine from Donald Trump's perspective, and we see this with the Chagos Islands as well. I disagree with what he's done, but from an American point of view, it's a good deal for them. The thing is as well, I think...
If we're paying for it all, it's economic, then... Well, but there's more than economics at stake.
Of course, but they get Diego Garcia, so they're happy enough. But no, you're absolutely right. The interesting point as well is that the special relationship clearly means nothing. Keir Starmer went to the White House and said it all went marvellously. Donald Trump, he's my BFF. Actually, no, that's me.
But we always
nothing.
know that, don't we?
Yes, we do. But we've been sold this fiction that somehow we have this better relationship.
No, I think we do. I think there's the sharing the English language, which I think is still a crucial fact. And I think in terms of values and in terms of...
I agree on all that, but it just hasn't helped with this
and you know what? And when the proverbial hits the fan, we're there for them in a way a lot of other countries aren't, and they know that. And by the way, they're not. What was it that J.D. Vance and others and Pete Hegseth were referring to? These sort of, these freeloaders.
Yes, the
freeloaders in Europe.
Freeloaders.
An awful lot of our freeloading, when it comes to defence, freeloading, very, very brave men and women died in Afghanistan and Iraq for Americans. So didn't feel very freeloaded then, did it? But this thing, where does this end? Because this is going to dominate American news. It's certainly dominating news across the world. Everyone's kind of poised, waiting. We don't know what the tariffs will be. We don't know who they'll hit, what they'll be on. We don't know how long they'll last. There's a big question mark about whether Donald Trump does.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the White House saying that they don't have the information. The usual sort of diplomatic channels that are there, give us a hint, let us know, so we can prepare this. It really is one of the great unknowns, and part of sort of the beauty and the danger of Donald Trump is that so much of what he does is unpredictable.
And do you think that is, you've been a political watcher for a long time, do you think that is part of what he wants to do? We talked about it on the show a lot, being the big disruptor, being unpredictable, and it kind of makes everyone go, oh, and he's sort of bringing about the power.
And listen to him as well. There's this isn't being done by press release. This is being done in a big, bold, this is going to affect the world. I'm the leader of the free world. Donald Trump, not me.
Oh, now that would be interesting.
Maybe that was a Freudian slip, I don't know. And then he's essentially saying, I'm going to change things. I'm going to shake up the global world order, the economic order of the world tonight at 9 o'clock.
I know people say he's a very successful businessman. I think a man who's had lost money running a casino, I think there are question marks about that. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. That is just a simple, reasonable, factual point. I don't think that necessarily, everything in global trade works like running a casino or building a big new glamorous apartment building in New York. There are other issues at stake. My concern, and I mentioned this when we spoke to Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, earlier in the show, we talked to him about the Chagos Islands, but the concerns about a trade war escalating. Now, we use economic sanctions as part of warfare, you know, against Russia over Ukraine and other, you know, Iran over their funding of terrorism across the Middle East and elsewhere. We do use economic, but also there is always a concern about economic tariffs being used as a punishment and affecting international relations. We've already seen the damaging of relations between America and Canada, which should be the closest allies. They've got so much in common, and Mexico as well, and Australia, and the UK, and the EU. These are the democratic nations of the world. These are key NATO members, they're G7 members, and we are seeing the breakdown of that trust and those relationships. There is a danger there in a very dangerous world with hostile players like Russia, like China, like Iran. That breakdown of that relationship could be very damaging.
I think you're right, Julia. We've seen it over Ukraine. We may well now see it economically as well, where essentially you're at war on one front, whether it's economically or in terms of sanctions on Ukraine or a deal with Russia or Putin or whatever, but then you're supposedly having good relations otherwise, and things are fine in another respect. So that is very difficult. It's a tricky picture when previously not everything was perfect between the United Kingdom and the United States under the Biden administration, but certainly things were more fractious and they're pointing at least in the same direction. Things are changing. Trump says America first at all times, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. But will this be good for American consumers? Again, as you said, when we started this conversation, a lot of people are going, I don't work for the car industry. I don't make anything that we sell to America. It's nothing to do with me. When the economic damage hits, as it will, we will all be paying the cost, because it's going to have to be dealt with at the next budget by the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, assuming she's still in a job at that point, and then we will all be paying for it, whether it's losing out on public services, whether it's higher taxes, in some, that's the most likely thing, paying higher debts, high interest on our national debt. We are going to feel the impact.
And Rachel Reeves then gets to blame America and say it's all their fault, nothing to do with
nothing to do with us,
my management, or perhaps even mismanagement.
No,
one might
nothing
argue,
to do with energy prices, or welfare dependency, or high taxes. No, absolutely. It's fascinating. Thank you for those highlights of PMQs. Very interesting questions there. Peter Cardwell there.